Hello, hello. Heather Jean here. Confidence Through Cabaret, the podcast, or vodcast, depending on how you're viewing this or listening to this. So, Confidence Through Cabaret, the podcast, is about all things confidence. And that means that we talk about our personal life, work life, or stage life, whatever your stage is. And my guest today, we will definitely be talking about work life slash stage life, but mainly stage life. So have you ever feared being in front of a camera? Have you ever feared being in photographs even? That was me. I have very few photographs. When my children were growing up, I had very few photographs of me in them. I was always behind the camera. I just couldn't face the camera. And then going online into a business means that you have to do lives, you have to show up. If you're going to do podcast recordings, if you're going to be in other people's groups, those are all times when you need to be on camera. But even if you don't have an online business, you will find that you need to be on camera somewhere, whether that's on Zoom or whatever your business is using, or Google Hangouts, whatever that is. So you need to be able to be comfortable on camera. And that's what this episode is all about. This is confidence on cameras. So if you are watching this on Vodcast on the YouTube channel, you can also listen to this anywhere you get your podcasts on Confidence Through Cabaret. And if you are listening on Confidence Through Cabaret podcast, you can also see a video version of this on Vodcast on Confidence Through Cabaret YouTube channel. Check out the Vodcast playlist. There is also a Confidence with Coffee segment, which is kind of a summary and me giving my own thoughts. So check that out as well. That's Confidence with Coffee on the Confidence Through Cabaret YouTube channel. So on with my guest. I'm so excited for this. I've wanted to do this episode for a very long time because I think a lot of us, even if we are on camera a lot, we kind of cringe when we think about being on camera. And it is something you get used to, but it's also something that you need to keep improving and developing and keeping up with all of the technology, which is the bane of my existence. So today we are joined by a professional video and podcast editor who is a motion graphics creator. He's an artist, and he is one of the Confidence Through Cabaret co-pioneers. So if you have seen our videos, if you've listened to our podcast, if you've been on anything that is kind of online content other than text or written, then this person will have been responsible for some of the pre and or post production. So I am really pleased to be welcoming today the amazing Adrian Spencer. Hello.
Thank you. Hello. How are you doing?
Ooh, yeah, can we edit in some applause, please?
What was that?
The hands going up in the air. I
will put in some like a applause track. Yeah.
Some sound effects.
Yeah. So, how are you?
I'm really great. How are you?
I haven't seen you for ages. Good.
I know.
Who made that amazing intro of yours? I love that intro, by the way.
You love the intro. The intro was made by an incredible techie person who is a video and podcast editor and motion graphics creator. And it is our second. Is that our second intro? The music?
Second intro, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I love what you can do with just the intro and outro. And it's something that I use for everything. So whether it's live or whether it's pre-recorded, I use an intro or outro that you've created. So let's start with that then. Do you need an intro and an outro?
I think we sort of talked about this a lot with a lot of entrepreneurs or techpreneurs or whatever they want to call themselves. And I think that you don't feel like you need to brand your video straight away. I think what's really important is that you start. So don't worry about your logo. Don't worry about what kind of fonts you're using or colors. I think people can use this as an excuse for not starting. Like, get the podcast up and be consistent. What's really important is you're producing content every week. So yes, at some point you will need to be, I'm sure a lot of you watch YouTube videos, you'll need to be branded, and it will need to be slick, and it will need to be consistent. But don't worry about that when you start. Just get the content out there. So yes, it's not the first thing that you need to do, because you could spend a lot of time worrying about that, and really, as I said 3 times, what's really important is that you start broadcasting. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, funny you say that about 3 times, because I've run presentation skills for corporations, for decades now, and, we are supposed to tell people things 3 times.
Okay, that's a coincidence. I just tend to repeat myself, so that wasn't
Yeah,
anything.
no, it's something that, a lot of times we're self-conscious when we're on camera, right? It's really
Mm,
strange that we can have a conversation with somebody, or, or some bodies, and we can, be articulate with our ideas, and we don't have to repeat ourselves. But
mm,
when we're presenting, we do have to repeat ourselves. So there's
yeah,
a
good
there's
point.
what they call the news format, which is tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what
Mm,
you told them. So it's kind of like
yeah,
a little intro to it, and then the meat, and then the summary of it, or the recap of it.
yeah,
So it is actually important, because people do zoom in and out. And particularly now, I think our attention span is a lot less than it was. There's so many
yeah, true.
distractions. People have their phone beside
Hmm.
them, and they have notes, as I do, and all kinds of things going on. So
Yes.
it is important to tell people things 3 times.
Yeah, I think if you're teaching and lecturing, that's the process too, isn't it? Like you have to, yeah, the sort of a, what do they call it? Plenary. You write on the board, and then you explain what you're going to be teaching, and then at some point you sum it up. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think I'd forgotten you were also a teacher
I was
of
teacher as well. Yeah.
all of the
Stuff.
video family.
Yeah.
So you can tell I'm not the techie person, right?
The stuff. That's fine. The stuff is, yeah,
The
it
stuff.
works.
Things and stuff. That's how I talk.
Things and stuff. Exactly. Yeah. It's fine.
Absolutely. But I like what you're saying about, not having branding, because that was one of the things that I kind of freaked out about. And I was so lucky to have you to be able to add those things afterwards. So it appeared that we pretty much always had those things.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I use StreamYard. I'll put the affiliate link in the show notes, because StreamYard for me was a savior.
Mm.
And so you created the little logo. There's a little Confidence Through Cabaret logo, because it's a paid version of StreamYard. If you have a free version, you can still do this, but it'll put the StreamYard logo in instead. But
And
adding,
did you find? Yeah. Sorry. Did you
Mm.
find that there was an advantage of StreamYard over Zoom, for instance?
Well, the thing is with Zoom, it doesn't allow you to be branded.
Right.
Right. It has a lot of other facilities. For example, if you're running webinars and you want people to go off into little rooms, you can put people in breakout rooms for smaller group discussion, which is great if you have
Yeah.
a large group. I find that StreamYard is better if you've got a group, not a huge group. Then you can leave everybody in the waiting room. So that means that they can see you, and because I set this up, I can see them, but they
Mm.
can't see each other, and they're more likely to leave their cameras on,
Right.
because it's just me and them. And that doesn't help me a huge amount, but it does show me if I've asked a question that they're typing, I can see that people are typing. And then that means that I pause a little bit longer.
Mm.
On Zoom, I find that people, don't prefer to have their cameras on a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So it depends on what you want to do with the tech. Zoom has a lot of great, kind of sharing facilities that are probably a little bit easier. The main thing that I find, besides the branding for StreamYard, is because it was made for gamers, it holds the Wi-Fi signal even if the signal dips out.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, so I find, that's what made me look at StreamYard, was because I tried to do a live Zoom in somebody else's group, right? It was all
Mm.
set up and promoted. 3 times I got cut off of Zoom, and I started
Right.
to look like I was pretty incompetent, because I'm trying to run a masterclass in their Facebook group, and I just
Mm.
couldn't run it.
Yeah.
And that's never happened to me with StreamYard. I've had some tricky times where it just wouldn't hold the signal, but that is the signal. Like if it's long, if it's more than, a couple of minutes, it will cut off because
Mm.
there's no signal.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
find that StreamYard is much more consistent for going live or for recording and not having to edit those things together.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. I think it's important to say, if Zoom or StreamYard scare you, just get your phone and prop it up on the bookcase and record straight to YouTube and put it up. If you don't have a guest, just talk to camera and put it straight up, and then worry about streaming and lives and groups later. But it's important that you're comfortable just talking, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's certainly where we started was just in social media and doing lives and or recording things and then posting them. And YouTube is great for that. I always say to people when they want to start a podcast, just start YouTube, like just start recording a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And so, as you said, you don't have to worry about editing at that point. You just need to get your content out there. And just be comfortable talking.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, it helps if you, and again, what I started with in StreamYard was having somebody in the waiting room that I was talking to, because on confidencethroughcabaret.com, speaking of, we have a branding yourself, your personal brand masterclass. So go check out confidencethroughcabaret.com. But with that, I had somebody in the waiting room that nobody can see. So I had somebody to talk to. That gives me a little bit, otherwise you're just you in the little green light.
Yeah, which is scary, which is odd, I think, for a lot of people. Yes, that's very true.
Yeah. So let's talk about, okay, so we've talked a little bit about just get out there and get started with it. And the fact that StreamYard, like all the banners and all the colors and everything, so easy to set up. I'm not even kidding. I'm the person that accidentally makes Instagram accounts when I'm trying to log into my own. So I'm not a techie person. No comment, Adrian. I know. But so I'm not a techie person, and StreamYard is just so user friendly. So again, I'll put the link in there. And if you have any questions, I am always happy to chat through how I went about it from a really, basic level to learn StreamYard. And I'm still learning on it because there's so much to it. Let's talk about setup otherwise. So let's talk about so you're talking about even if you've got your phone and you're going to talk into it, what should you be thinking about in terms of the setup? Like this.
I think in terms of setup, that I've got this background here that's relevant to what we're talking about. So this is my edit suite behind me. You have a very, very plain background. I know that you often have, I can just see in the corner, this is mirrored, I can just see in the corner there, a heart. Yeah, there we go. So lovely.
I love sequins.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a cabaret podcast. So things that are relevant to cabaret will be important to put in the back of the shot. A plain, clean background is nice as well. Think about, I happen to be my lighting's not great here, but I'm by a window on the right-hand side, and I have a light here on the left-hand side, and I have a light above me. Light's really important. I know you have a ring light. They're relatively inexpensive, so get yourself a ring light, because there's nothing worse than people not being able to see you when you're talking. So I think lighting is the first thing you should think about. And people use their laptop. I'm using my laptop now, or their phone, or some people have a desktop computer with a camera on it. So really obvious thing to say, but don't hold your phone. Have something steady to put it on, like a tripod, or prop it up on the bookshelf, or use your laptop. Nice, steady, clean shots. Not too busy. I mean, this is busy because this is what I do, but just make it clean and simple. And as you progress, you will see that actually your backdrop is really, really important. So a lot of people on YouTube have quite elaborate backgrounds that relate to their personality and what it is they're trying to talk about. So gamers have toys. Well, I have toys here as well. Gamers have, probably see, I have a racing chair, and gamers have toys in the background and ambient lighting and all that kind of thing. And you don't need that stuff, but as you have things that are relevant to what you do and what it is you're talking about. But first and foremost, what's really important, the difference between an amateur video and a professional video, or a corporate video, or a film, is nice, clean, well-framed shot with bright lights, nice ambient or bright lighting. I think it's really important.
Yeah, and I have considered, because I don't have an overhead light where I am, which makes it a little bit more of a challenge. So I've just got a lamp, which I like to leave on. It's quite warm, even though you can't see it. It just adds some warmth, and I feel better about that. And I do have a window. Sometimes I need to record in the evening, so I don't have the sunlight. I have considered things like box lights, which are, you can get really small, inexpensive ones now, which do either side of your face. I've got a ring light coming straight onto my face, which just kind of evens out the light, and you can change it with different filters, so I can have it more blue or more gold or whatever. But I have considered, kind of having box lights as well, which give you that evenness on either side. And I know a lot of people use that, which is great for production value.
One thing's a very good tip if you're on Zoom, if you're on a Zoom call, is now I've got two screens here, but even if you're working on one screen, if you reduce the size of the Zoom window and put a white background on your computer that reflects light back from wherever the light is. So the darker the background on your computer screen, the worse image, because that's reflecting light onto you. The light's bouncing back onto you. So if you use a clean white background, then you have a brighter image.
So you would just reduce the see, this is where my techie bit comes in. So you would just reduce, so you wouldn't have your image full. You just have it, you've got a white kind of frame.
Exactly.
Okay. Well,
and then therefore there's more light on your face.
That happens on StreamYard as well. And it is very difficult when you're running a StreamYard camera, because you've got banners that you can use, and you can add people's comments onto the screen and things. So you kind of can't have, I don't have this imagery full screen right now, and there is a lot of white screen around it.
A lot of white space. Exactly. Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And I think, just kind of thinking about when you're using a phone, I do have a tripod. I don't use a phone and I also have a little, very small, probably about 4" by 4" ring light. It's actually a block that I take with me that I can stick onto, like if I'm recording in my car, for example, I can stick that onto the window, and it gives me a little bit more light as well. Which works really well. And I think I paid like $10 in Canada for it. So,
perfect. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's rechargeable. You don't need to plug it in. But I think when you think about being on your phone, if one of us was on our phone, we would have kind of a full upright rectangle, and then we'd have a phone. And there's a border above and below.
Right. Yeah.
Which isn't as good a shot. So I'm not saying don't use your phone, but when I see things, I'm looking at properties right now, and some of the realtors or estate agents use their phone to take pictures of the rooms, and they're very narrow, small photographs, and it's much harder to see than if they used a camera. And you can.
That's a good point. Yeah. So are they filming in portrait, or are they not filming in landscape?
Yeah, no,
I suspect. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the question: is if I'm going to use my phone to do a live, should I make sure that it's in portrait?
Yeah. So that if the orientation of your phone is landscape, then it's the same as the image I'm now seeing on my laptop. So you've got more space on the screen as opposed to what you were talking about, which is the portrait screen.
So we should use.
So you should use it in landscape.
Use it in landscape. Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know, because I never do that. I never think of that. I'm used to holding my phone. I hold my phone.
Right, exactly, which most people do. Which is like, So if you can, you can get sort of a clamp that will hold your phone in place, because there are lots of stands. I have one here. There are lots of stands you can put your phone on, but actually what you want is a clamp that holds your phone so it's in landscape orientation.
Right. Okay. That's good to know. Okay. One more thing about setup, and I didn't start with this, but I do have one now, is about sound. So how important is the microphone? Because a lot of people go out and set up a podcast, and then they drop it after 3 months, and then they've spent all that money.
Yeah. So sound's really important. And they say in sort of cinema and television, sound it is as important as the image, which sounds like a really obvious thing to say, but if you can't hear what people are saying, you're kind of finished, really. It doesn't really how good the visuals are. Sounds really important. I happen to be wearing earbuds. I'm not using the mic on the laptop, because that would be a lot of ambient sound in quite a big room. That's quite a hollow sound, and it would pick up noise from, not that there's anything happening in here, but it would pick up noise from around the room as well. So I think about, you don't necessarily have to buy an expensive pair of earbuds or headphones or a microphone and a mixing desk and all that kind of thing. A lot of people do, and it's a visual as well. So a lot of people talking to you on YouTube will have a mic in shot. That's partly a visual thing, but think about sound a lot, and there you go. Pop shield and microphone. Yeah, perfect. So that's, I think, a really good setup. Earbuds or headphones as well. Try to avoid using the mic on the phone or the laptop or iPad or whatever you use. Yeah, think about that. So yeah.
And again, I just used my mic on my laptop originally because I didn't have anything else and I didn't want anything else because I really didn't want to be on camera.
Right. So you hid behind it. Yeah. You can put a big microphone kind of there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I use if I'm recording myself, I don't mind if my microphone is in shot, but I don't.
Yeah, a lot of people do that.
Yeah, I don't prefer it if I'm talking to you. We're in fairly small windows, so I don't really want to clutter the shot.
No, that's true. I think it tends to be people just doing a piece to camera that'll have a mic, there that you can see in shot. I think if you're talking to someone, that's kind of rude, isn't it, to have the mic there as well? It doesn't really make sense. Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
But yeah, So think about getting, as I say, not a particularly expensive mic when you start out, but think about sound.
Yeah, and all we did for my mic was just look at the Amazon reviews and find
Exactly. Yeah.
well reviewed.
And obviously the advantage of wearing headphones is you can hear yourself back and hear the presenter back as well, and that's kind of useful.
So I don't have earbuds, and I have tried using earbuds, borrowed earbuds, and I didn't find it worked for me very well. It wasn't comfortable.
Yeah,
Then when one of them fell out, then the sound didn't work. It didn't.
Yeah.
It just didn't work for me. And I'm so, and I sometimes I'll wear the big ones if there's an echo. Is there a way to predict whether there will be or not?
So the way that most laptops, iPads, phones, whatever, tablets work is that once you connect them to the device, on some of them it will default to a mono signal because there's a microphone and a speaker effectively in these, and it will when you're listening to music, you listen in stereo, so it cuts out the mic. Otherwise, and when you're talking, the mic is used and you get a mono signal. As far as a feedback and echo, that's a good question. I've never encountered that personally. Not sure why there'd be an echo. It may be that, I don't know. I would be guessing. I'm not sure.
I've never had it with recording, recording for the podcast or YouTube, but I have had it with lives many times.
This is an edit point. I'm cutting this out now.
I have had, and I say that because I mean, your profession is much more about pre-recorded and so on. But for me with lives, I've come unstuck several times. So I always have a pair of headphones, even though I don't want to wear them. I have them next to me. She says I don't have them next to me, but I normally do.
Yeah.
That's because I know I'm with you. I know you can fix this. But I do typically put a set of headphones in case when I'm live anyway, then if there's any kind of echo, and I don't know if
you mean that is that happening when you're using your laptop, you mean?
Yeah, so if I'm using my laptop and I'm on Instagram Live or Facebook Live, then a lot of times that echo will happen.
So that maybe you must have, I'm sure, all of your viewers will have listened to the radio and heard somebody being interviewed and heard the journalist say, could you turn your radio down, please? Because there's a slight delay. There's a milliseconds of delay. And if they've got their radio on and the radio's playing the channel that they're being interviewed on at the same time, there's an echo because there's, as I say, a few milliseconds delay. It may be that because and this is why people use headphones, it may be that because your mic on your laptop tablet is quite close to your speaker, it might be that there's a slight delay. There's a latency, maybe. So that's why it's best to use the headphones because you don't get that. So yeah.
Right. Okay. And that's actually another thing that I have made the mistake of doing very early on when I'm been recording is keeping Facebook open in the background, and every time there's a notification, it dings, and
absolutely,
yes, will do that, so now what I do is say, we're not on social media today. Could you shut your social media so that we don't get things?
Do not disturb is a feature on most platforms, isn't it? So you can just turn off all those annoying dings and notifications. That's another advantage of wearing the headphones. You won't hear any of that. like any of that kind of pinging going on.
Okay, is
Or
that
you will hear it, but the person you're talking to won't.
okay? That's interesting, and it won't be on the recording or on the live.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, see, I didn't know that. This is very useful. This is
That was tip number one.
no,
Tip number
this is I have
whatever.
lots of tips here. I have lots of tips. Yeah, because I've got like half a page of notes already here. Okay, let's talk a little bit about during. So, should I be looking at you because I can see you kind of in the middle-ish of my screen? Because as we've
Yeah.
already talked about, we don't have that shot fully maximized. So, should I be looking at you on my screen, which is the middle of my screen, or should I be looking at the little green light?
That's a really interesting point. I'm looking at you, and you happen to be on the left of my screen. I don't know what my eye line looks like because when I look away, obviously, I can't tell. But I think it's really unnatural to look at the camera when you're talking to somebody on Zoom or StreamYard. So I always look at the actual image. It means the eye lines are a bit odd sometimes, but I don't think most people would be comfortable looking at the lens. They need to look at the person that they're talking to. So yeah, always look at the person that you're talking to, even if the eye line is odd.
Right. Okay. Because I'm
Yeah.
used to looking at my green light because I record
Okay.
by myself a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I do try and look at my green light because I can see
Okay.
my guest right below it because you're on my right. So I can see
Yeah.
my guest right below it.
Okay.
So
That's
my
interesting. Yeah, preference. Yeah, I find that disconcerting. I need to see people when I'm talking to them. I don't like, as I've, said to you many times, I don't like phone calls because I can't see the person I'm talking to. And I think I would find it odd to be talking to the green light rather than talking to you. So, but that's just a preference.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when when you think about where to look, it's really obvious if you're uncomfortable. So it's wherever
Mm.
you're comfortable is what you're saying.
Yeah, totally. And you'll notice on television, on the news, if somebody's being interviewed, they don't look down the lens because they're giving the impression they're talking to the journalist. So they look to the left of the camera, or they look to the right of the camera, but they don't look straight down. So it's that kind of side shot. But because they're not, it's a different situation. But they're not. It's the journalist who's telling you what's going on. They're being interviewed. They therefore need to look like they're talking to a person, not that they're talking to an audience.
I guess unless you're doing kind of the whole, what's it
Unless
called?
you're reading the news.
Unless you're actually talking to the at-home audience. Like
Exactly.
you.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Because you used to work at the BBC, didn't you?
I've mentioned that. Have I mentioned it before?
You have mentioned the BBC.
Couple of times. I did. That's how I started. Oh, well, I started in the theatre, but then I worked at the BBC. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think being, I mean, the theater is a whole different thing. But again, they would be thinking about acoustics because the theaters were built for that,
Mm-hmm.
and they have
Yeah.
sound techs if not. They would think about the set to create the
Mm-hmm.
ambience, and then they would be thinking about reaching the back of the house and
Mm-hmm.
making everybody feel included. Actors on stage kind of don't face each other because then you only get a
Mm-hmm.
from the audience, right? So they would
Yeah. And what's interesting about being on stage, especially if you're a nervous person, you might think, well, it's not a nice thing to do, but actually, because there's lighting on the front of the stage, there's lighting in the grid. You can only see the first few rows of the stalls, so you're playing to like a void. You can't actually. You can hear people, but you can't really see anything. So there's no eye contact. It's disconcerting sometimes if you do. And at concerts, you can actually see people, but on the whole, you're just playing to this kind of mass, to this void. So it's, in a way, technically, it's easier than what we're doing now because you're not really playing to a single person or a group of people on Zoom or Stream. You're just playing to the audience.
Yeah, and actually, it's one of the things that we learn as cabaret performers as well about looking to the front of the audience and then raising our gaze to kind of straightforward, which would be kind of the middle of the audience,
Absolutely.
raising our gaze slightly higher, which appears like it's the back of the room, and
Exactly.
it's a really key part of it. You can see nothing, cabaret, there's some sort of spotlight and you better be standing in it unless part of your act, and so
Exactly.
you're quite blinded. And I've performed with you a few feet away, and I can't see any of you.
You can't actually see people. No, you would be surprised the number of actors who get nervous on live television because they're faced with a presenter and a camera that is like this one that's clear, where the green light on it, the red light is clearly live, who are used to single camera dramas where it's a room full of technicians and other actors, but their focus is very small. And also, and a lot of actors say that they love the theatre, but some don't like that void that they're in. Some like the intimacy of filming. Everybody has different preferences. Is the short version of the long-winded thing I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah, and I work in my corporate training conferences. I use actors quite often, and there are a lot of actors that can't do that kind of work.
Absolutely.
Partly because a lot of them haven't had, kind of corporate business jobs before, so they don't understand the speak or the pace to it.
Yeah.
But even if they have worked in, businesses, a lot of them, they're very close to their audience, and there's no anonymity to it at all, neither from the camera nor from the distance of their audience. And so when they're very close, then they're quite vulnerable, and they use as their kind of almost their bodyguard, that I'm going to protect them and look after the audience, treating them with respect.
Yeah, I found that very disconcerting. On the occasions that I've acted, there are some performances in the round, so you're in with the audience pretty much, and there are performances where for some reason there's a concept that you walk out during the interval amongst the audience. It's not something I like at all, because for me it breaks there's a like in inverted commas magic there, and it sort of breaks that. And it's either that you've got to be in character throughout, or there's something about the distance between you and the audience which is pleasurable almost, that isn't when you. And I can imagine with business acting as well, the fact that you might be in a brightly lit room and you can see everybody is such a completely different
Totally
experience to acting theatre.
So let's bring that back to being on camera, because we're talking confidence on cameras here. So how does that play to how do you play to your audience? If you're on Zoom and you've got several windows, should you be doing that same thing of looking around?
I don't think you should. I think that's a really interesting point. It on a group of, I don't know how many people you have on your StreamYard calls. I think you've still got to be talking to one person, and in that case, talking directly to the camera, which is what you're most comfortable doing, rather than, I think it would be odd to see your eyes darting around the screen, really. So just talk to the camera, because obviously that's represents whoever you're talking to.
Yeah, and I mean certainly on Zoom, because you could have hundreds of people on several pages. And they could all be on camera. You would look quite shifty if you keep shifting.
You would look odd. Yeah. You're, in that case, you're like a television presenter. You're just looking straight down the barrel, as they say. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And certainly when if we come back to StreamYard, the audience, if they're not on the camera, because you can only have, I think it's 10 or 12 people on the camera with us, say, then that same thing would apply. But if they're all in the waiting room, they're on the bottom of the screen.
Okay. Yeah.
And so you would be looking down, and that isn't so great, because if you're recording it and you want to use it later or whatever, send replays out, you'd need to raise your gaze again. And
I think, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, that's the rule, isn't it, of looking?
Yeah, I think that only makes sense if the people watching, the broadcast, have had a visual representation of what you're seeing. So sometimes at the conferences that you watch, you'll see somebody standing on a stage and they have a video wall, and there's lots of people on the video wall. That makes sense. If you can see them looking to the right and looking to the left, talking to people, you understand the space they're in. But if you have no understanding of the fact that it's a grid of people, you looking around the room doesn't actually make any sense. So it's all kind of context, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and I guess it's what you're doing with it as well. For my master classes that I do online for free, I don't send out replays. I want everybody to be there in the room experiencing. So it's quite a different thing, because there's not going to be that record of it, and I'm not going to be sending it out as part of my branding. So I would be thinking about seeing them, and not so much seeing how that's going to appear.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk a little. Sorry, go. Yeah.
No, I think it's all really a really simple focus, and that it has to be intimate. So don't think about the number of people watching, or don't think about the grid of people. It's just you focus on the person that you're talking to. I do remember starting to work on live programs in children's television. They were Saturday morning programs, and they were hugely popular. And I had a moment where I thought, oh, millions of people are watching this. And you have to let that go because it's not the point. You focus on what you're doing in the moment. You don't, it doesn't, it's an abstract concept anyway, but you could lose yourself in that kind of, oh my God, millions of people are watching, but that's not the point. It's what's happening in front of you. I think that's the point.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that actually was what I was going to say when I said let's move on to the next bit, because I think it's quite different recording a podcast or vodcast than it is doing a live. Now, for a lot of us, we have to do both, because if you're going to have a podcast, or even your YouTube channel, you're going to want to promote it somewhere. So you're probably going to do live somewhere else. So for most of us, going live is a reality. Which makes the next bit not so relevant because you don't get a chance to edit. But when you're pre-recording, then you can edit things out.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about editing. What should we or should we not edit out?
That's a really good question. So I do a lot of corporate editing, and a lot of the time, the idea is that there is a quite specific, quite precise flow to the way that those podcasts or the films that we make have to be edited. So as a whole, and I'm not treating clients like some kind of amorphous mass, this thing called clients, but I think it's just gone off. Editing out or stumbles or pauses tends to be the way that most of those professional videos work, because there is, I think, a feeling that you want to give the impression that the people that you're listening to know precisely what they're talking about, and they're imparting quite, in this case, kind of financial information to you. And so what I'm doing, these ums and ahs and pauses and stumbles have to be taken out. Sometimes they like the flow of it if it's more of a casual conversation, but a lot of the time I am closing up gaps between what people are saying, and even taking out breaths sometimes, stumbles and ahs. And a lot of the time, once the it doesn't happen often, but towards the end of the podcast, if there is a moment where it sounded like in a question or an answer, somebody kind of was grasping for an idea, like I've been doing for the past 30 minutes, they will tighten that up or maybe take it again. I know that you prefer the more natural flow of the way that like we don't edit those moments out at all ever. Unless it's something like StreamYard hasn't started or the intros come in and then it keeps on playing or something. Like unless it's something like that, we don't edit out stumbles and pauses at all. What's your feeling about that kind of flow?
Well, so first of all, the reality for me is that I do lives, right? I just did 5 days of challenge in our Facebook group, Confidence Through Cabaret.
It's really distracting. Sorry, it's really distracting. It's just really distracting in the background.
There's like this old-fashioned TV tennis going on screens as a screensaver. I'm actually more distracted by the fact that your background is now dozens of pictures of me, which freaks me out. But anyway, let's not go there, because I am actually getting better with having the pictures. And I think for me, being on camera, just slightly going off on a diversion for a second, being on camera, like in photographs, like group photographs, I'm still very uncomfortable with, and I would rather not be in them. But I have a lot of regrets now of, I don't have very many pictures of me with my children, and you can't create those. I also don't have very many pictures of me at the time looking young, which I didn't realize or appreciate, because now, but anyway, let's not go into major therapy.
You would be surprised the number of actors that don't watch the films that they're in. Like a lot of famous actors do it. Samuel L. Jackson, I've never watched a film I'm in. Larry David, the producer, writer, actor Larry David, was the first person that actually, because a lot of actors say that, and it sounds like they're grasping for a compliment. It sounds like they want someone to say, "No, you're wonderful." But actually, he said, the reason that I don't watch it back ever is because I know what I was thinking. So you get the performance, I get all the anxiety of I don't ever see it, so there's no point.
So I don't watch back any of my performances for a significant amount of time. That is because I need to have some distance from it. I replay that as I intended for it to go. And that is how I choose to store that information in my brain. Because if I store the information in my brain about, oh my goodness, I messed this up and I didn't do that, should have done that and all that. First of all, the audience didn't know, so that
They
I'm
don't
giving
know. No,
extra
exactly.
credit on myself. But
Yeah.
second, I think when we store the information, it's important that we store it as a positive, and then that
Mm,
means that the next time we're faced with that, we're not thinking about, "I always mess this
mm,
bit up," right? Because
exactly.
of course, that's an embedded command to your brain, and that will make us do that again. And
Yeah.
then eventually that becomes, repeated behavior and a habit. So I don't watch those things. I watch them in my mind about how they were intended to go. And it is
Yeah.
quite a significant amount of time, like months,
Mm.
sometimes years before I will watch it back. And then when I watch it back, I go, it was nowhere near as bad as I was expecting.
Actually, it wasn't as bad as I thought. That's a really good tip, actually. Yeah, very good tip. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I
Wait. Yeah.
now watch my own, when I record a masterclass, I watch it back because
Mm,
I don't create the workbook usually before I record. I create it after,
mm.
because I then if things come up, then I can include them in the workbook. So I'm quite comfortable now watching myself back. But and same with like seeing those photographs behind you, which I'm ignoring. Yeah, but I can see them quite detached. They are
Mm.
branded images. They're not me. Do you know? And
Yeah.
that's quite a different thing.
Yeah.
And that was the same with Samuel Jackson. If he was to watch himself, he would be watching himself as the movie character, not as himself. And
Himself. Yeah.
that's a real skill to be able to detach from that. And that just comes from
Absolutely.
constant practice.
Yeah, exactly. Very good point. So that's a good tip. And I think to your point, if you're teaching, lecturing, if you're producing masterclasses or workshops, it's important for you to watch it back because you need to know that effectively that the information given is correct. Your presentation style is, you need to know that that's working. But then beyond that, I think your tip of wait a few months or however long it is, because you will then see it in the way that everybody else is seeing it. You won't. It's not the anxiety inducing moment that you were having. So yeah, good point.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then it's important to store that in your brain. I learned this from my NLP training,
Mm,
and I think when comedians are very good for doing that, and I actually taught my children to do this as well. So when they would come off of the cricket pitch, having gone, been I was going to say struck out, but that's baseball. But you know what I mean? They're
yeah.
right, if they're at bat. And you in cricket, you only get one chance, right? It's not like
Mm,
baseball where you're gonna be up again in an inning or two. So when that happens, then of course, then they go, I'm useless at, and then they
mm,
reinforce that. So I'll
yeah.
before they have a chance to do that, I'll say, okay, sit down and picture how that should have gone, how perfect that shot was
Hmm.
intended, and program that in
Yeah.
before you allow any other thoughts in. I know a lot of comedians do that. I know for a fact because the person that I learned my NLP from worked with very, very famous people: Eddie Izzard,
Mm,
Barbara Streisand, those kind of
mm,
people.
yeah.
And that was the programming that they took them through. So, but coming back to editing, so first of
Mm,
all, because I have a live presence, then
mm,
don't worry about it so much. And that's how we got off on thinking about watching yourself. Um,
hmm.
I also don't need the editing done for the ums, the likes,
Yeah.
the whats, all of those kind of things. I am well aware that I do those. And
Mm, yeah.
when I'm teaching people for presentation skills, as long as there isn't that sense of it's distracting that you keep saying those words,
Mm,
but a word that you constantly repeat, then it becomes distracting and people start
sure.
counting that or whatever,
Yeah.
the kinds of
Yeah.
memes in corporate. But as long as it's not distracting, it gives you a chance to pause. And I've said this to you
Hmm.
before. I talk fast, especially when I get going. It's like going
I
downhill.
hadn't noticed. Yeah.
So 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 I want to have that pause, but that also lets my audience have a breather as well. Now I
Mm,
understand if you're giving financial or legal or those kind of
mm.
things, you want to be an absolute
Got to
authority,
be precise. Yeah. Yeah.
zero doubt.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't believe that for me that creates a doubt.
Mm.
It
No, it doesn't at all. No.
sense that I'm thinking about what I'm saying, and because I'm an
Mm,
expert and I think out loud, I don't need to think about it inside of my head. I don't need to
Yeah.
prepare a script. The first time I think about it consciously is coming out of my mouth. So that gets me into a
Yeah.
bit of trouble. But I think when we take that moment to say, and consider where we want to go, that gives our audience a chance.
Yes. That's very
And that
true.
makes them
Yeah.
think, you're considered in it. Because
Mm.
I've been told a lot of times, it doesn't seem like you're really thinking about it. Did you write it down? Or,
Mm.
are you BSing or whatever? And it's absolutely not. But those little fumbles, if you like,
Mm.
those stutters can really add credibility in my
Yes.
context anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good point. Yeah.
So
So what else about editing have you found?
okay, so I don't like editing, and I will
That's
edit
basically it. Yeah.
this. And I find QuickTime Player far easier than iMovies.
Sorry. Yes.
So for me, QuickTime Player works really well to
Yeah.
just trim a clip or to take out a chunk.
Sorry.
Uh,
Sorry. I've got to pause. Sorry.
okay, so I can carry on with this though. So I find when I replay the video, so it's downloaded, I replay it, I go on to QuickTime Player, and then I do Command T, which brings up trim, and I can trim it to the length that I want. And
That'll
so,
be an edit point. Yes.
well, it doesn't need to be an edit point because we're
Doesn't need
perfectly
to be.
share confidence through Cabaret. I mean, usually Chase, my dog, is climbing
This is
across me
true.
right now and covering the whole
Yeah.
screen. I don't edit any of that out because that's
Yeah.
life and how it works. And my office is in my home in for
Mm-hmm.
confidence Cabaret. So,
Yeah.
well, usually,
Mm.
sometimes it's at events that I'm running, but who knows? But I think those are the realities, and we're a lot more forgiving of those things now than we ever were before COVID.
Mm. True.
I was just talking about that, trimming like a clip or taking a chunk out. I did try editing on YouTube. I messed it
Mm.
up completely, and then it's permanent.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I had to take it down and upload it again, and I didn't in the end. I just thought, okay, fine, then that chunk can be missing.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah.
but so I don't do it that way now. I do it on QuickTime Player, and I don't find iMovies. I know a lot of people find it super easy. I know my children, when they were 10, found it easy, but I don't. So I find
Yeah.
QuickTime a lot easier
So I
for that.
think this is sort of an important conversation. So you use QuickTime Player, which is free. Effectively, it's bundled with the computer, and a lot of YouTubers use Final Cut X, which is a step up from iMovie. People use iMovie. I use Premiere. Don't get wrapped up in which piece of editing software is the best piece of editing software to use, because it kind of isn't that. Obviously, it's important later. But fundamentally, start, and you can, as you've said, you can cut and you can trim things easily in QuickTime Player and get them up onto YouTube. YouTube, I think the conclusion that we came to with the YouTube editor is probably duplicate your sequence first, because most editing is non-destructive. I haven't used YouTube. I suspect the YouTube is destructive, and therefore you're kind of stuck. What you've got is what you've got. So duplicate your sequence first before you edit YouTube, or try to.
Yeah, or download it and then do your editing and then upload it again. If
And then upload it again. Yeah.
that seems to work for me as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So there is something that I learned from you a long time ago, which was about, in the shot, if the video, if you, this is obviously going out on audio as well, so it doesn't matter so much because it's just as long as the sound is good and there's
Yeah.
flow. But if you're on video, then, so my head shouldn't be really big compared to yours, or really
I was
tiny.
just going to say the same thing. Exactly. Yeah. That as a shot doesn't make any sense at all. That's perfect. So that level, just draw a line, almost. That needs to be the same, and the size of the shot needs to be the same. Where we are within the frame needs to be the same as well.
I'm trying to raise myself up now, but I know
it doesn't have to be exactly, but yeah, it doesn't make sense. One person their face is filling the frame like that. Yeah. So think about that shot, and I've seen a lot of some people, depending on what they're doing, they will do a piece of camera on their desktop, and it's quite a wide shot. Famously there was a shot on the BBC where the guy who was talking to camera, his daughter came in the machine into the shot, and then his wife came in and tried to get the daughter out of the shot, and so you can kind of avoid that. And as you said, Chase tends to dip his nose in sometimes, which you can't avoid. But these tighter shots are obviously better. You don't need to see the whole of the room. You know?
No, and that's the beautiful thing, like you said, just to have a plain background or relevant things in the shot, and
Yeah,
then and then try. I do actually use that tip all the time. So I let my podcast or vodcast guests, or even masterclass guests, I let them set up their shot how they want to in terms of their
yeah.
size and so on, and then I try and match that. So if
Then you
they're
match it. Yeah,
close, I move closer so that we're a
good.
similar
Yeah.
or in a similar position.
Yeah,
Uh,
those of you who are comfortable editing and it's a bit of extra work could increase the in post. You could increase the size of one shot. That's quite a lot of work. It makes sense to do exactly what you're doing, which is just to do it right in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And even the, we've done a workaround so that you don't have to add the intro and the outro because we can upload it to YouTube and then that can be, so
Exactly.
we're as quickly as possible trying to reduce some of the post stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
certainly when you're live, you can't.
Yeah.
So when you're live, should we be going back in then and adding things in, or should we just leave it live as it is?
I think leave it live. Live. I think leave it live as it is. I think your solution on StreamYard, which is to take the QuickTime movies, to take the intro and the outro, and effectively play them in, because you have that function, you have that ability to play in footage. I think it's perfect. But I think we're talking about editing now, and I think as sort of little editing after you broadcast live as is humanly possible, because I don't think there's any point if people have seen you live. Why would you then give a edited, trimmed version to the replay audience? You know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
do
you've got what you've
use
got really.
else. If you wanted that
Mm,
footage, that might be a way to go. But they're
yeah.
really for live. It's already out there.
Exactly that. Yeah. That makes sense. So there are lots of editing platforms, but don't at this stage, if you're starting out, and I assume most people who are watching this will be starting out, don't worry about that too much. Certainly the kind of more expensive, complex programs, you won't need them now.
No, and I think there are a lot of podcast editors out there who are great, who can look after your podcast for you completely.
Mm,
They'll even do the
mhm,
social media package and so on, and that's great. But make sure that you are aware of the brand that you want to put out there, and
mm.
then let them know. So if you want your ums and ahs in there because you're perfectly imperfect, then leave those in. But you need to tell them, otherwise they
That's
might
a
make.
very good point. Yeah, any good engineer, editor, producer will work with you and understand your brand and understand who you are. Um, there might be, if you're paying somebody to put your work together, they might just take it away and do it and hand it back to you, and that's no good. So think about that, definitely. Yeah.
Mm, mm. Well, Adrian Spencer, I have a few questions
Yeah.
for you.
Oh. Okay.
If you were performing cabaret
Oh.
and going on stage, what kind of cabaret act would you be doing? So, just if you're new to Confidence Through Cabaret, among other things, but the simplest definition for me for cabaret is that it is in a venue with a small audience. So it's very intimate. You're very connected to them, and we've been talking a lot about that kind of setup in this episode. But so that you could be singing, you could be dancing, you could be doing burlesque, you could be doing comedy, you could be doing any number of things, but in a small venue with a relatively small audience, not in a large,
Hmm.
theater, or Albert Hall kind of thing. So, so you could be performing cabaret acts in a huge venue, but it's not cabaret as far as I think of it. So, what kind of act would you be doing if you were performing?
Well, I have an advantage over all of your guests. A, because I've heard this question many times because I've been editing it, and B, because we actually talked about it. So, and I found yesterday I was in the gym and I found the piece of music that I suggested for this performance. So, I haven't performed burlesque ever. I thought, well, let's not make it complex. Let's do something really simple. And the concept that we came up with was that I would make coffee on stage. That was basically it. That I would be a barista, and we'd think about the kind of costume that I was wearing, and occasionally throughout this performance, I would realize that because the audience, the great thing about cabaret is that you have an incredible audience there, and they react to what you're doing, and so occasionally people would react, and I would turn around and look at the audience, as what we were talking about before, and then I'd carry on. So it would be this almost kind of Dadaist kind of surreal performance where I am just simply making coffee on stage. So that would be
Absolutely.
That
And
would be my piece.
I have seen people make I've seen a performer make whale sounds. That was their
There you
act.
go. There you
I've
go.
seen people do all kinds of things. And the thing is with cabaret, what's so beautiful about it and what's so wonderful to connect with the audience is that you're telling a story, right? So
Exactly.
your music and that's really relevant to what we've been talking about today, right? That whole kind of the setting the scene and then telling your story in a way that makes some sense or
Yes,
purposely doesn't make sense if that's your narrative, but it is
exactly.
about sharing that message. And so you would be talking about making coffee, but it wouldn't just be about making coffee. It would be about
No,
where are you. It would be
exactly.
about why are you making coffee. There would be a whole backstory to it, which may or may not be evident to the audience. um,
I'm just playing the music in the background now.
there you go. There you go. Okay, so what one prop besides all the coffee making equipment? What one
Mm,
prop do you want to have on
mm.
stage with you?
And does the prop have to speak to who I am particularly?
No, the prop could
Or,
be anything. I just want to rule out like coffee machines and coffee
yeah.
grounds, and
Okay.
mugs and that kind of stuff because that's obviously going to be part of your act, right? But what
Yeah.
what would what would you like to have on stage with you?
So do most? I'm going to ask you a question. So do most people choose a prop that makes them feel comfortable, or a prop they can hide behind, maybe, or just what's the idea?
Well, so that's the
Yeah.
interesting thing is that uh, I don't set a limit to that. So I had
Mm,
somebody say a pen because it makes them feel
okay.
like a barrier to the audience, which a lot of
Yeah.
presenters do, right? They'll have a pen,
Mm,
and the problem with that is, of course, then they shake it and it reminds everybody of
yeah.
school and being told off. But
Yeah.
they'll have a pen because it feels like a barrier, and it might be like a pen so that they can write on a flip chart or something, which is what I
Mm,
often. But the problem is then we click it or we play with it or we fiddle it in our fingers or we point it. And so, but a lot of times why we're holding that is it is a barrier between us and the audience and it gives us that
mm.
space. I've also had somebody say that they like to have a coffee mug, which a lot of people use
Ooh.
as a prop now, right?
Well, they've
Because
stolen mine. Yeah. Yeah.
it's yeah, but they'll have that because again, it's kind of a barrier. It gives them a chance to pause. It
Mm,
gives them a little bit of
yeah.
a chance to hide. And so my reason for asking the question about what one prop is because, and you can't have a coffee maker because you're making coffee. That's part of your equipment.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
the prop brings out lots of different things. So for some people, it is that barrier, and for
Mm,
some people, it's kind of they can luxuriate in it, they can wrap themselves, it feels soft or bright or whatever it is.
mm.
So a lot of people choose things like a large boa or you
Yeah.
know those kind of things because they can hide behind it, but they can also kind of dance with it.
Right. Okay. Well, I like the idea. I know we talked about this, but and I don't know if this is the correct term. The baristas is like I think pinny is like the wrong term, but yeah, like that kind of pinny. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That. So I think that'll probably be mine.
Yeah, and what's fun about that is there's a tie on it maybe, or you can design that in different ways. It can
Yes.
cover the body, but it can also,
Exactly. It can cover your body, but it can reveal as well. Yeah.
So is that
So
your
I like
why?
that.
Is something that you can kind of play with the dimensions of your apron?
Totally. So I like the fact that it has those two elements to it, and actually that could be the moment that it's effectively covering and that it is not tight and it's not clingy, but then effectively it's sort of cheeky that there could be a turnaround and it's kind of revealing. There's a duality there. So I like that.
That's wonderful, and that's why I asked that question isn't so much about what the prop would be, but why.
Yeah.
And so the
Yeah.
the person who said pen, when I asked why, they were like, "I don't know. I just feel more secure with it." And then you can
Mm.
dive into what is it that's going on there? Why do you feel you need a barrier with your audience?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is
Interesting.
why I asked that question.
Mm.
My
I
final
think yeah.
question is going to
Mm.
be, what would your stage name be? Please welcome
Mm.
to the stage.
Please welcome to the stage. I did say once it would be the fabulous conky, and in the West Indies, a conky is a sweet. It's like a cornmeal and brown sugar and raisins. And someone's going to tell me I've got the recipe completely wrong. And it's made in a banana leaf as well. we tend to have them at bonfire nights and Christmas. So the fabulous conky, very few people know what I'm talking about, but that would probably be my stage name. A sweet something.
So the characteristics that attract us to our stage name are the things that are our strength.
Mm.
So whether that's, kind of comfortable, and it, kind of reminds us of things where we feel secure or happy or whatever it is. Also you're talking about the flavor and sweetness. There's
Well,
also
that's a memory from childhood as well, isn't it? So that's kind of
yeah, and there's also some
yeah.
quirkiness to it, right? Which is
Yeah.
part of that whole kind of personality. Some slight obscurity to it in
It's
terms.
obscure, exactly. Yeah. It's that. A lot of people would have to look that up. They wouldn't know what that is, and I kind of like that as well. But as I say, it's a connection to a culture and to a childhood memory, and yeah. So it's a lot of things there.
And I think, we can use those stage names because we have our inner critic. And our inner critic will, tell us all kinds of things that we're doing wrong or whatever, however you talk to yourself. And for some of us, it goes in a little bit further into, an imposter voice. But we also have, access to a lot of other voices. And that voice of being the fabulous conky is like, you know what? I am fierce. I am strong. I'm secure and safe. Being able to, I love that you can tune into the senses of it being, sweet tasting, the smell.
Yeah.
Those kind of things really can take us out of a state that can be unhealthy or unhelpful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
And
and I
then
know a lot of people need that. Yeah.
Funky. I don't have to feel like this.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I think I believe it was somebody in the Reagan administration, which sounds like an odd thing to say, but there was a connection. And he said whenever the press were talking about him or bad things were happening to him, he would tell himself they were talking about the character. It was George Stephanopoulos, and he would say they're talking to a character. They're talking about him. They're not talking about me. So he would take it out, and it is that kind of thing. And I'm sure a lot of actors do that as well. And it's they're talking about the character. They're actually talking about me personally. Yeah.
And that is important to remember, most especially for the context of this episode, which is about being on camera. If there is discomfort, if you're worried about people judging you, if you're worried, what will they say or think or do as a result of seeing you or hearing you, then you have to go back to thinking, okay, but that's what I'm saying, not me as a person. That's my
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's my message, or that, they disagree with my message. That doesn't mean that they dislike me as a person.
Just like exactly. Yeah. It's a good point. So don't take it personally. It's never personal.
It's never personal because they don't know you.
They don't know you exactly. Yeah. Very good point.
Yeah. And what they think of you is their business. It's not really yours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's their deal. Their deal.
Yeah.
Any last minute favorite piece of advice that you've learned?
Words of wisdom. Gosh, in terms of being confident on camera, could say something trying like be yourself, but really, but that's actually the truth of it, and that I think really fundamentally be yourself, because people don't act, don't perform. I know we just talked about performance, but that's a separate thing. What's really important is that you are yourself on camera. And if if there's something about you people don't like, then we can talk about that later. But if you're pretending to be someone else, just forget it. Don't broadcast if you're performing and being somebody else. Be authentic. I think it's a really, really important thing. And don't rub your hands like this all the time because it's really distracting. But be yourself.
Yeah, and I think how do you manage fear, like stage fright?
Ooh. Well, I mean, as I've been on stage, and as many people say, there's that moment where you feel sick. And a lot of actors say, well, if you don't feel like that, then you're not going to perform well. I think you need that. I think that's an indication that actually it's going to be all right. So if you don't feel like that, there's something wrong. So I wouldn't worry about that part. If you don't fear it, then there's no point doing it. Actually, like you have to have that moment. Yeah, you have to have that moment. Whatever you do, really, you've got because you care. Because I'm going to let all these people down, or I'm not going to get it right, or I'm going to mess my line up, or like you have to have that, that like attention to detail and that care. So absolutely, the fear's got nothing to do with it. The fear has to be there. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And it does mean that you care. So if
Yeah,
you get those butterflies and you go, yes, I care about
yeah,
this.
exactly. Yeah, it's good. Good thing. I mean, I've had, you take that to its extreme. When I was at drama school, the head of the course said when she was a stage manager, she had to push someone on stage once. And that's quite extreme. And it's quite a famous actor, and it sounds ridiculous, but it was almost, and she also told the story of I can say this probably, Richard Briers. Every night would come off stage and say, how was I? And she said, it's got nothing to do with me. But he wanted her to say, it was good. Yeah, you were good. I've done that a lot. I've done that a lot of times. And it sounds like an odd thing to say to these people that you watch in television and films, but they all do the same thing. They all want to know how they were. And if you don't have that, then you're not a good performer. I think you don't ever assume that, you got it right, that you need that reassurance. I often tell the story when I'm editing or producing motion graphics is that, I will work and I'll be happy with the work, and I don't present it until I'm happy with it. But that's not, beyond that, there isn't anything. And what's happened is occasionally a client will come in or somebody will pass my desk and they'll look over my shoulder and say, oh, that's really good. And I'll wait till they've walked away and I'll look at it again and go, oh, actually, it's really good. Because that validation is actually really important. You don't get that all the time. You just work, you just do your work. But that moment, whether it's the act coming off stage or someone looking at my work, is really nice. And that tension and the fear, I think, is all natural and really important. So don't run away from that, because it makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. And that's where it's important to have people around you as well that are supportive, that are your cheerleaders. And I've stage managed many cabaret shows. And there are two things that I always have to do. If the performer makes eye contact with me right before they go on stage, because I am their last kind of lifeline before they go on
Mm.
stage and perform, particularly with burlesque, because it's very vulnerable, because we're often exposing our body. Uh, you know, they'll want to hear something like, "You look beautiful,"
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Yeah.
when they come off. And I have worked many times with one of the UK's top burlesque performers,
Mm.
just absolute powerhouse, the beautiful Cleopatra, who will always come off and say, "Was that okay? I did my
Mm.
best." And
Yeah.
it's almost a maternal moment for me to,
Mm.
just wrap them, with a hug and it was beautiful, it was wonderful, they loved it, listen to the applause,
Mm-hmm.
absorb it all, because our senses are so heightened when we're in that state, that it's such a beautiful thing for somebody to be able to kind of gradually bring you back down, so you can hear the applause, or you can
Mm.
hear the feedback or the comments or the
Yeah.
views or the likes or the whatever. And it is not about the number of them, it's just
Mm.
about that you connected with someone.
Absolutely, yeah. And under those circumstances, correct me if I'm wrong, but she's talking to somebody in the industry as well, like she's talking to another performer. So it's a different kind of validation and love that you're giving to her too. So yeah, I think that's
Although I'm
really
nowhere near
important.
that kind of level that those performers are at, and it's just such a privilege to be in their company, and they do, and the humbleness is more endearing. It makes them keep trying harder. It's not, "Oh, I'm
Mm.
top 5 in the UK. I'm in the
Oh
burlesque
yeah,
company. I'm done,"
sure.
because
Yeah.
that then turns confidence into arrogance, and we are not
Mm.
confident.
Absolutely. We're not arrogant through cabaret at all. No.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There you go.
Yeah.
So, so I have loved this conversation. I really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy day to do this.
Yeah.
Um,
Apologies, I keep looking over here just in case that somebody starts buzzing me and I've got to
yeah,
run off and start editing. But yeah,
I'm well aware that you
super.
have many projects on the go right now, and you are at lots of people's beck and call. So, thank you for
Yeah.
taking time out of your day to do this. It is so
Yeah.
appreciated,
You're welcome.
so valuable.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, as they say.
So, I'm Heather Jean. This is Adrian Spencer. Join us on confidencethroughcabaret.com. We have new masterclasses going up every month and our workshops. We are on all of the socials as Confidence Through Cabaret, with the exception of Twitter, which is at YBYWYS. And Clubhouse, I am at Heather YBYWYS, and we have Confidence and Attitudes as the Clubhouse Club. So join us.
Mhm.
Please like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. Check out the Confidence with Coffee segment, which comes out every Thursday. following the vodcast or podcast episode coming out every Wednesday. Adrian, thank you once again. Join me in sharing what we talk about, why our letters are YB, YW, YS.
Why are they? Tell me.
Those beautiful letters stand for, it is your body, and it is your world, and it's your stage. Take up space and own it. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.